The moment Lucy Nyambura was thrown out of her marriage, the street went unnaturally quiet. The gate closed behind her with a soft metallic click, final, deliberate. Her suitcase lay open at her feet, its contents spilling onto the ground, like a life no one wanted anymore. Inside the house, voices carried through the walls. Laughter, celebration. Someone else had already taken her place. Lucy stood there for a long second, unmoving. No tears, no shouting, just the slow realization that loyalty had cost her everything and earned her nothing. She sank onto the curb, staring at her empty hands. Across the road, a man sat against a concrete wall. Clothes-worn, thin eyes, calm and observant. A beggar, most would say. Invisible, forgettable. But as his gaze met Lucy's, something shifted quietly, dangerously, marking the beginning of a choice no one would understand. Before we continue, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? If stories of betrayal, dignity, and unexpected redemption move you, consider subscribing and staying with us. Lucy Nyambura used to believe that silence was a form of love. In the early years of her marriage to Daniel Mwangi, she told herself that the quiet moments, the ones where words were missing, where emotions were swallowed instead of shared, were signs of maturity. Daniel was not a loud man. He did not shout, he did not hit, he did not storm out in anger. Instead, he withdrew. And Lucy learned slowly and painfully to adjust herself around that absence. They met when Lucy was 25, working as a receptionist at a small logistics firm on the outskirts of Nairobi. Daniel was a junior operations officer, then ambitious, sharply dressed, always talking about where he was going rather than where he was. Lucy admired that certainty. After growing up in a modest household in Nyeri where dreams were practical and hopes were measured, Daniel's confidence felt like a promise of something bigger. When he noticed her, really noticed her, it felt like being chosen. Their courtship was brief but intense. Daniel spoke of partnership, of building a future together. He told her she was different from other women. "You understand sacrifice," he once said, smiling as if it were a compliment. Lucy took it as one. Marriage came quickly. The wedding was modest but respectable, paid for mostly by Lucy's savings and contributions from her side of the family. Daniel promised that once his career took off, he would repay everything, make it all worth it. Lucy believed him. Belief at the time came easily. The first year was not unhappy, but it was uneven. Daniel worked long hours and came home tired, often distracted. Lucy handled the house, the meals, the bills, the emotional labor of making a marriage feel like a home. When Daniel snapped or went quiet for days, she told herself it was stress. When he forgot anniversaries or dismissed her concerns, she reminded herself that successful men carried heavy burdens. Just be patient, her mother advised over the phone. A good woman builds a man. So, Lucy built. She woke before dawn to prepare Daniel's breakfast. She ironed his shirts carefully, making sure the creases were sharp. When money was tight, she skipped meals without telling him. When Daniel suggested she quit her job to focus on the home, she hesitated, but agreed. He said it was temporary. He said he needed her support. Without her salary, Lucy became financially dependent without fully realizing it. Daniel took over the accounts. He decided what was necessary and what was not. When Lucy asked for money, she learned to justify every request. "Why do you need that much?" he would ask, his tone casual but cutting. "I just thought." "Thoughts don't pay bills, Lucy." He never raised his voice. That was the hardest part. His calm made her doubt herself. Over time, the distance between them grew. Daniel's phone was always face down. He guarded his messages, carefully stepping outside to take calls. When Lucy asked questions, he accused her of being insecure, ungrateful, dramatic. "You're imagining things," he would say. "Not everything is about you." Lucy tried to fix herself instead of the problem. She dressed better. She spoke less. She learned to read Daniel's moods and adjust accordingly. On good days, he was charming, even affectionate. On bad days, he was cold and dismissive, as if she were a burden he had not planned for. The loneliness crept in quietly. Lucy stopped inviting friends over because Daniel didn't like noise. She visited her family, less because Daniel complained about the cost of travel. Slowly, her world shrank until it revolved entirely around him and the house they shared. By the third year, Daniel's career had improved significantly. He moved into a managerial role, started attending networking events, and dressing even sharper than before. With his success came a change Lucy couldn't name at first: an impatience, a sense that he was outgrowing her. He began correcting her in public, making jokes at her expense, comparing her unfavorably to other women who were more polished, more ambitious, more presentable. Lucy laughed along her cheeks burning. At night she lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering when love had turned into something she had to earn daily. She missed being seen, missed being spoken to with kindness, missed the version of herself who once believed she mattered. Still, she stayed, because leaving felt like failure, because she had been taught that endurance was strength, because she believed that if she just tried harder, gave more, complained, less, things would return to how they once were. What Lucy didn't know, what she refused to let herself see, was that Daniel had already stepped out of the marriage emotionally, long before he did so physically, that his ambition had begun to include a different kind of partner, one who matched the image he wanted to project to the world. And while Lucy was busy shrinking herself to fit into Daniel's life, someone else was quietly stepping into the space she was being pushed out of. The betrayal had not arrived suddenly. It had been building for years, disguised as ambition, masked by silence, justified by progress. Lucy would only understand this later, when the silence finally broke and the cost of her loyalty was laid bare in the most public, humiliating way possible. The truth did not arrive with drama. It arrived on an ordinary afternoon, wrapped in convenience and carelessness. Lucy Nyambura had gone to Daniel Mwangi's office, unannounced, carrying a small container of homemade stew. It wasn't a grand gesture, just something she used to do when she still believed small acts could soften distance. Daniel had mentioned he would be working late. Lucy thought the food might help. The receptionist looked at her with polite confusion. "Oh," she said, hesitating. "Mr. Mwangi already left." Lucy frowned. "Left? He said for a meeting," the woman added quickly. "With Vanessa." Lucy did not ask who Vanessa was. Something in the way the name was said, too familiar, too practiced, told her everything she needed to know. She walked out of the building, slowly, the container growing heavier in her hands. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Cars honked, vendors shouted. Life continued, indifferent to the quiet collapse happening inside her chest. Lucy did not confront Daniel that night, or the next. She waited, watching more carefully than she ever had before. She noticed the way his cologne changed, the way he smiled at his phone, the way he started coming home earlier on days he claimed to be exhausted. A week later, she followed him. She told herself she only wanted clarity. Not confirmation, just clarity. But when Daniel parked outside a modern apartment complex in Westlands and walked inside with a woman whose laughter carried even through closed glass doors, clarity came with a sharp, unforgiving edge. Vanessa Atieno was everything Lucy was not. She was tall, confident, dressed in tailored clothes that spoke of money and certainty. She moved as if she belonged anywhere she stood. When Daniel leaned in to kiss her, it was not hurried or secretive. It was easy, familiar. Lucy sat frozen in the car across the street, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her fingers ached. She did not cry. Shock had stolen that from her. All she could think was how practiced Daniel looked, how little hesitation there was in his betrayal. That night, Lucy asked him directly, "Is there someone else?" She said, her voice steady despite the storm beneath it. Daniel did not deny it. He sighed as if she had asked something inconvenient. "Lucy, let's not do this. Do what she whispered. Ask the truth." He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Vanessa understands me. She supports my goals. She doesn't constantly need reassurance." Lucy stared at him, stunned. "I supported you when you had nothing, and I appreciate that," he replied coolly. "But people grow. You stayed the same." The words landed harder than any slap. Within days, the situation escalated. Vanessa began appearing openly at Daniel's office events, at dinners Lucy had once attended by his side. There was no attempt at discretion. The message was clear. Lucy was being replaced. When Daniel finally told her to leave, it wasn't framed as cruelty. It was framed as practicality. "This arrangement isn't working anymore," he said one evening standing in the living room they had once painted together. "Vanessa will be moving in." Lucy laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because the alternative was breaking apart completely. "You want me to just go, you'll figure something out," he replied. "You always do." She thought that was the worst of it. She was wrong. Daniel's family arrived the next morning. His mother sat stiffly on the couch, her lips pressed thin. His sister avoided Lucy's eyes entirely. When Lucy tried to explain, tried to remind them of years of sacrifice and loyalty, Daniel's mother waved her off. "A woman who cannot keep her husband has failed in her duty," she said. "Daniel needs peace, not drama." Vanessa arrived shortly after, impeccably dressed, carrying herself like a guest of honor. She looked Lucy up and down, once her expression unreadable. "I didn't know you were still here," Vanessa said lightly. Daniel said this would already be handled. Handled. Lucy felt something inside her crack open. By noon her suitcase was packed mostly with clothes she had bought herself long before marriage. The gifts she had given Daniel remained behind. So did the furniture. So did the home she had tried to build. As she stepped outside, Daniel stood at the door, his face carefully neutral. "You didn't have to make this difficult," he said. Lucy turned to look at him one last time. "You made this impossible!" The gate closed behind her. That was how Lucy Nyambura became invisible. In the days that followed, the humiliation deepened. Friends stopped calling. Mutual acquaintances chose sides or chose silence. Word spread, quickly twisted into something ugly. She couldn't satisfy him. She was too quiet. She was holding him back. Lucy tried to find work, but without recent experience or references. Doors closed politely. She moved into a small rented room near the market paid for, with what little savings she had left. At night, she lay awake listening to the sounds of the city, wondering how everything she had worked for had disappeared so completely. The deepest wound was not the loss of Daniel. It was the realization that the love she had given so freely had been treated as disposable. She replayed conversations in her mind, searching for signs she had missed. Moments where she could have spoken up, demanded more, left earlier. Regret settled in like a heavy fog. One afternoon, while buying vegetables with the last of her money, Lucy ran into Daniel and Vanessa together. Vanessa smiled when she saw Lucy, slow, deliberate. "Oh," she said, "I was hoping we'd meet." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "I just wanted to say," Vanessa continued, "that everything happens for a reason. Some people are meant to be stepping stones." Lucy said nothing. She simply picked up her bag and walked away. Her spine straight, her face calm, but inside, something hardened. The betrayal was no longer just personal. It was social, public, systemic. Lucy had not only lost her marriage, she had been stripped of dignity in a society that offered little mercy to women who fell out of favor. That night, sitting alone in her rented room, Lucy pressed her forehead against the wall and allowed herself to cry, for the first time since leaving the house. The tears came quietly, without drama, soaking into the thin pillow beneath her. She did not cry for Daniel. She cried for the woman she had been faithful, hopeful, believing that goodness was always enough. What Lucy did not yet know was that this public breaking was not the end of her story, but the clearing of a path she never would have chosen willingly. And somewhere beyond the walls of that small room, the world was already shifting slowly, quietly toward a meeting that would challenge everything Lucy thought she understood about worth, loss, and love. The room Lucy Nyambura rented measured barely enough for a bed, a chair, and a narrow path between them. The walls were thin, the paint chipped, and the single window faced another building so close that sunlight only reached her in pale fragments during the afternoon. It was not the kind of place she had imagined for herself at 32, but it was what she could afford. For now. Each morning, Lucy woke before the city fully stirred. Not because she had somewhere to go, but because lying still made her thoughts too loud. She washed her face in cold water, dressed carefully in the cleanest clothes she owned, and stepped outside, with the quiet determination of someone refusing to disappear. Finding work proved harder than she expected. She walked from office to office, market to market, clutching a folder that contained her old certificates and a resume that suddenly felt embarrassingly thin. Receptionists smiled politely. Managers glanced at her papers and promised to get back to her. Some were more honest. "You've been out of the workforce too long," one man told her gently. "We're looking for someone more dynamic," another said, not meeting her eyes. Lucy learned to nod, thank them, and leave without letting her shoulders slump. Pride became something she rationed carefully. By the second week, her savings had dwindled to almost nothing. She stopped buying meat, then fruit. She learned which vendors at the market were more generous with bruised vegetables at the end of the day. Hunger became a dull companion, present but manageable. What cut deeper than hunger was the way people looked at her. In her old neighborhood, she had been Daniel Mwangi's wife. She had been greeted with respect, invited to events, consulted on small decisions. Here she was, just another woman trying to survive. Invisible until she was inconvenient. Watched closely in shops. Ignored when she spoke too softly. One afternoon, Lucy overheard two women whispering behind her at a stall. "That's her one," said. "The one whose husband left her for that businesswoman. I heard she couldn't keep him happy." The other replied. "What do you expect?" Lucy paid for her vegetables with shaking hands and walked away without turning around. The words followed her anyway, clinging to her clothes like dust. At night, the loneliness grew heavier. Lucy lay on her narrow bed, listening to arguments through the walls, babies crying, radios playing low. Everyone around her seemed to have somewhere they belonged, even if it was imperfect. Lucy felt suspended in between, no longer a wife, not yet anything else. She missed simple things: cooking without counting coins, laughing without checking who might hear, being touched with affection instead of indifference. Some nights, anger surfaced hot and sharp. Anger at Daniel, at Vanessa, at Daniel's family, at herself. Other nights, the anger drained away, leaving only exhaustion and a quiet, aching sadness. It was on one of those quieter days that Lucy's path crossed the edge of something new. She had spent the morning walking the length of the city, following leads that went nowhere. By mid-afternoon, her feet ached and the sun pressed down with relentless heat. She stopped near a busy intersection, leaning against a concrete barrier, to catch her breath. That was when she noticed him. He sat a few meters away, partially shaded by a faded billboard. His clothes were worn but clean. His shoes had been repaired more than once. He wasn't shouting or begging loudly like others nearby. He simply sat, watching the flow of people, with a calm that felt out of place amid the chaos. A small handwritten sign rested beside him. It didn't ask for money. It read, "Anything you give is enough." Lucy found herself staring longer than she meant to. There was something in the man's posture, straight-backed, composed, that contradicted the label most people would give him at first glance. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. He nodded once politely, as if acknowledging her presence, rather than pleading for attention. Lucy checked her bag. She had no spare coins, only a half-filled bottle of water, and a small piece of bread wrapped in paper. She hesitated. The rational voice in her head reminded her that she had almost nothing herself. That generosity was a luxury. That survival required boundaries. But another voice, quieter, older, pushed back. She stepped closer and held out the water. "Here," she said simply. The man accepted it with a small smile. "Thank you," he replied, his voice steady and warm. You didn't have to. Lucy shrugged. Neither did you. For a brief moment, they sat in silence. The city hummed around them. Cars' footsteps, distant horns. The man took a careful sip of water, then capped the bottle and handed it back. You might need it more than I do, he said. Lucy shook her head. I can find more. He studied her for a second, not intrusively, but with something that felt like understanding. Then I'm grateful. She left without asking his name, without offering anything else. It felt like a small, insignificant exchange. But as Lucy walked away, something inside her loosened just slightly. Over the next few days, their paths crossed again. Always by chance, always brief. Sometimes Lucy had a piece of fruit she could share, sometimes just a greeting. The man Samuel, she learned later, never asked questions, never pried. He listened more than he spoke. Lucy found herself lingering. She told him nothing of Daniel or Vanessa. She didn't need to. Samuel spoke of ordinary things, the way cities changed people, the burden of expectations, the strange kindness of strangers who didn't know your past. His words were simple, but they carried weight. You can lose everything, he said once, and still keep the most important part, if you're careful. Lucy didn't ask what he meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. As days turned into weeks, Lucy's life remained difficult, but it no longer felt entirely empty. The routine of walking, searching, surviving continued. But now there was also the quiet comfort of being seen without judgment, even if only for a few minutes at a time. She didn't think of Samuel as hope. That felt too dangerous. But she did begin to think of him as something else entirely. A reminder that dignity did not disappear just because the world stopped offering it. That kindness did not require abundance. That being broken did not make one unworthy of connection. Lucy was still at the bottom of her life, still uncertain, still hurting. But for the first time since the gate had closed behind her, she no longer felt completely alone in that descent, and sometimes that was enough to keep walking. Lucy Nyambura did not mark the days anymore. Time had stopped behaving the way it used to, no longer measured by plans or milestones, but by endurance. By how long she could stay on her feet, by how little she could spend and still make it to the next morning. What she did notice, though, was Samuel Adewale. Not at first as a person, more like a constant, a fixed point in a city that kept shifting beneath her. He was always there near the intersection when she passed through on her way to job interviews or markets, sitting quietly, watching, sometimes reading a tattered paperback whose cover had long since disappeared, sometimes just observing people as they hurried past faces fixed on destinations that mattered to them. Lucy told herself it meant nothing. She was not looking for connection. She was barely holding herself together. But familiarity crept in anyway, soft, unannounced. It was easier to greet him now. A nod, a good afternoon, occasionally, a few words exchanged before she moved on. One evening after a particularly long day of rejection, Lucy stopped longer than usual. Her last interview had ended with the same polite smile, the same hollow promise. She sat down on the curb, a safe distance from Samuel, her bag resting at her feet. The city lights were beginning to flicker on, bathing the street in a tired yellow glow. You look like someone who's been carrying heavy thoughts, Samuel said gently. Lucy let out a short, humorless breath. They don't feel heavy anymore, just constant. Samuel nodded as if that made perfect sense. Sometimes that's worse. She didn't ask how he knew. She didn't challenge the insight. Instead, she stared ahead, watching cars pass. I used to think if I did everything right, life would meet me halfway, Lucy said suddenly. The words surprised her. She hadn't planned to speak. Turns out life doesn't negotiate. Samuel smiled faintly. Life listens poorly, but it watches closely. Lucy glanced at him. You sound like someone who's lost an argument with it before. Many, he replied, and I learned that shouting back only made me tired. The conversation ended there not because it needed to continue, but because it had done what it needed to do. Lucy stood, adjusted her bag, and walked away with a little less weight on her chest. The next day, she brought him food. It wasn't much, some rice and vegetables she had cooked carefully to make it last. She told herself it was practical. Easier to share than to carry leftovers all day. She placed the container beside him without ceremony. Samuel looked up surprised. "For me, for you." Lucy confirmed, "If you want it." He accepted it slowly, respectfully, as if acknowledging the effort rather than the food itself. "Thank you," he said. "You shouldn't have." Lucy shrugged. "I shouldn't have done a lot of things." This one felt harmless. Samuel laughed softly. It was a low sound, warm, unguarded. Kindness rarely feels harmless to those who receive it. Lucy waved off the comment and left before the moment could stretch into something uncomfortable. From then on, the pattern settled naturally. Lucy brought food when she could. Sometimes fruit, sometimes leftovers, sometimes nothing but conversation. Samuel never asked for more, never expected anything. He thanked her each time with the same quiet sincerity. What struck Lucy most was what he didn't do. He didn't complain. He didn't narrate his suffering. He didn't perform desperation. There were days when other beggars shouted or pleaded loudly for attention. Samuel remained still, his presence understated. People noticed him less, but Lucy suspected that was by design. One afternoon, curiosity finally got the better of her. "Why don't you ask for money?" she asked. Samuel considered the question. "Because it changes the nature of the exchange. How when people give money, he said they often want relief from guilt, from discomfort. When they give something else, they give themselves." Lucy thought about that for a long moment. "And what do you give?" Samuel's eyes met hers steadily. "Nothing they can see." Lucy didn't fully understand, but the answer stayed with her. As weeks passed, their conversations deepened, not through confession but through reflection. They spoke about cities and how they swallowed people whole, about expectations placed on men and women, about the quiet violence of being ignored. Lucy found herself talking more freely than she had in years. She told Samuel about growing up in Yeri, about her mother's strength, about the dreams she once had that no longer felt reachable. She spoke of marriage without naming Daniel, of betrayal without details. Samuel listened, always. He never interrupted, never offered solutions. When Lucy paused, unsure whether she had said too much, he simply nodded, as if acknowledging the truth of her experience, without needing to reshape it. "You know," Lucy said one evening, "people think being alone is the worst thing." "And you don't?" Samuel asked. "I think being unseen is worse," she replied. Samuel's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough that Lucy noticed. Something passed through his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. "Yes," he said quietly. "That's much worse." There were moments. Lucy caught herself smiling unexpectedly. Moments she realized she was looking forward to these conversations, these brief pockets of calm. It frightened her. She had not planned to feel anything again. Not after Daniel. Not after everything that had been taken from her. Emotional attachment felt reckless, dangerous. But this was different. Samuel did not demand space in her life. He occupied no territory. He offered presence without expectation. In his company, Lucy felt no need to perform strength or competence. She could simply exist. One afternoon, as Lucy stood to leave, Samuel spoke again. "You don't owe me this," he said, gesturing lightly to the food she had brought, "or the time." Lucy paused. "I know. Then why do you keep coming back?" Lucy considered the question carefully. The honest answer rose to her lips before she could stop it. "Because when I'm here," she said, "I don't feel like something that failed." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. That matters. It was the closest either of them came to naming what was forming between them. Lucy returned to her rented room that night with a strange sense of calm. Her life was still uncertain, her future still unclear. She still had no job, no security, no guarantees. But something had shifted. For the first time since her marriage had ended, Lucy felt that her worth was not being measured by what she could provide or endure. It was simply being acknowledged. She did not call it hope. She called it breathing space, and sometimes that was how healing began, not with grand gestures or sudden changes, but with the quiet decision to keep showing up where kindness was allowed to exist. Lucy Nyambura began to notice the city again. It wasn't that Nairobi had changed. The streets were still crowded, the noise still constant, the air still thick with urgency and impatience. But something inside Lucy had shifted just enough for her to see details she had once ignored. The woman who sold tea every morning with the same careful smile. The security guard who waved children across the road. Long after his shift ended, the tired kindness that lived quietly beneath the city's rough surface. Her days remained difficult. She still walked long distances in worn shoes, still returned to her small room with more questions than answers, still counted coins before buying anything. But now, threaded through the struggle, there was a rhythm that steadied her. Samuel Adewale had become part of that rhythm. Their meetings were never planned. Lucy did not schedule her days around him, and Samuel never asked when she would return. Yet somehow they kept finding each other at the same intersection, under the same faded billboard, in the in-between hours when the city paused, just enough to breathe. Lucy continued bringing food when she could. Not because Samuel needed it. She suspected he could survive without her offerings, but because giving felt grounding. It reminded her that she was still capable of generosity, even when her own cup felt nearly empty. One afternoon, as she handed him a small container of beans and rice, Samuel looked at her with gentle concern. "You're losing weight," he said. Lucy laughed lightly. "That's what stress does." "That's what forgetting yourself does," he corrected. She shrugged, uncomfortable. "I don't have the luxury of worrying about myself right now." Samuel accepted the food, but he didn't open it immediately. "That's a dangerous belief." Lucy frowned. "Survival isn't dangerous. It's necessary." "Yes," he said calmly, "but survival without self-regard becomes something else. Endurance without dignity." The words lingered between them. Lucy sat down beside him, resting her back against the concrete wall. "You speak like someone who's had time to think." Samuel smiled faintly. "Too much time." She studied him more closely than usual, the lines around his eyes, the careful way he folded his hands, the stillness in his posture. He did not look defeated. If anything, he looked deliberate. "You weren't always like this, were you?" she asked. Samuel's gaze remained on the street. "Like what?" here Lucy said softly. "Invisible." For a moment, Lucy thought she had crossed a line, but Samuel did not pull away. He took a slow breath. "No," he said, "I wasn't." She waited, but he offered nothing more. Lucy respected the boundary. She had learned painfully that people revealed themselves in their own time, or not at all. In the days that followed, Lucy's job search grew more urgent. Her rent was due again, and she had barely enough to cover it. She accepted temporary work wherever she could, cleaning offices after hours, helping vendors pack up stalls, assisting at a small cafe that paid her by the day. The work was exhausting, but it gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: agency. She told Samuel about it one evening, her voice tired but proud. "It's not much, but it's honest." Samuel nodded approvingly. "Honest work has a way of restoring people." Lucy smiled. "You sound like my mother. Then she must be a wise woman." She laughed, surprised by the ease of it. As their conversations deepened, Lucy began to notice something else: Samuel's awareness of people. He noticed power dynamics, subtle shifts in behavior, the unspoken hierarchies that shaped interactions. He spoke about them not with bitterness but with clarity. "Most cruelty," he said, "once comes from fear dressed up as certainty." Lucy thought of Daniel, of Vanessa, of the way they had treated her once she no longer fit their narrative. "That sounds right," she murmured. One evening, as Lucy prepared to leave, Samuel stopped her. "Lucy," he said gently, "can I ask you something?" She turned back, Of course. Why did you stay so long? The question was not accusatory. It carried no judgment. It was simply curious. Lucy felt her chest tighten. I thought leaving meant I failed, she admitted. I thought love was measured by how much you could endure. Samuel nodded slowly. Many people believe that. Do you? She asked. He met her gaze fully now. No. I believe love is measured by how safe you feel when you're honest. The words struck something deep inside Lucy. She realized with sudden clarity that she had never felt safe being honest in her marriage. Not fully, not without consequence. She swallowed. I don't know if I know how to do that anymore. Samuel's voice softened. You're doing it now. Lucy left that night with her thoughts in a tangle. Over the following weeks, something subtle but undeniable happened. Lucy began to care about Samuel not as a solution, not as a fantasy, but as a person. She noticed when he wasn't at the intersection. She felt a flicker of concern when days passed without seeing him. She worried about crossing a line she had promised herself she wouldn't approach. She was not ready to love again. She was not sure she ever would be. But she trusted Samuel, and that trust frightened her more than betrayal ever had. One afternoon, Lucy found him standing instead of sitting. He appeared unsteady, his hand braced against the wall. Are you okay? She asked immediately. Samuel waved it off. Just tired. You don't look just tired, Lucy insisted. He gave her a reassuring smile. I've had worse days. Lucy didn't argue, but the worry stayed with her. Later that evening, alone in her room, Lucy realized how much Samuel's presence had begun to matter. She replayed their conversations, the quiet respect, the way he never diminished her pain or tried to reshape it. She wondered what it would mean if he disappeared. The thought unsettled her deeply. Lucy had not chosen love, not consciously. She had chosen kindness, consistency, honesty. Somewhere along the way, those choices had built something fragile and real. She did not know yet that Samuel Attawale carried a past far heavier than her own, that his calm was forged through loss, not peace, that his presence in her life was not accidental, but carefully chosen. For now, Lucy only knew this. For the first time since her life had unraveled, she felt seen without being examined, valued without being evaluated. And in that quiet space between survival and surrender, something new was taking root. Not hope, not love, but the courage to believe that dignity could still grow even in the most unexpected places. Lucy Nyambura did not set out to analyze Samuel Attawale. At first she told herself she was simply observant by nature, an old habit formed from years of living carefully, measuring words, watching moods. But as weeks passed, the small inconsistencies in Samuel's presence began to stand out quietly, insistently. They were not dramatic. They were subtle, and that made them harder to ignore. Samuel never scrambled for food the way others nearby did. When people dropped coins into his open palm, he accepted them with gratitude, but without urgency. Sometimes he redirected the money toward another beggar further down the street, as if need were a shared burden rather than a competition. He spoke English with an ease that felt educated, polished, yet never pretentious. His vocabulary shifted naturally depending on who he spoke to. Simple with children, precise with professionals, warm with Lucy. It was not the language of survival alone. It was the language of someone who had moved through many worlds. One afternoon, Lucy mentioned a failed interview at a mid-sized logistics company. They're expanding too quickly, Samuel said thoughtfully. Without strengthening their internal systems, they'll burn out their workforce within 2 years. Lucy blinked. You know the company, I know the pattern, he replied. It's common. She studied him. You sound like a consultant. Samuel smiled faintly. I've been called many things. Lucy laughed, but the comment lodged in her mind. There were other moments. Samuel never flinched at the presence of authority. When police officers passed questioning street vendors or chasing beggars away, Samuel remained calm, compliant, but unafraid. His posture never changed. He did not shrink. Once, when a young man tried to intimidate him for his spot near the intersection, Samuel responded with quiet firmness. No threats, no aggression, just steady eye contact and a single sentence, spoken so calmly that the young man backed away, unsettled. Lucy watched from a distance, surprised by the exchange. "You weren't scared," she said later. Samuel shrugged. "Fear gives power to the wrong people." Lucy nodded slowly. She had spent years afraid of losing a marriage that was already hollow. Fear, she was learning, had cost her dearly. Still, she did not ask Samuel who he had been before. She sensed that the truth, whatever it was, did not belong to her yet. What Lucy did ask eventually was simpler. "Why here?" she said one evening as they sat watching the sky darken. "This city has so many corners. Why this one?" Samuel looked out at the traffic, considering. "Because people pass through here quickly," he said. "They don't linger long enough to project too much onto you." Lucy tilted her head. "You don't like being projected onto." "I prefer being observed," he replied. "There's a difference." Lucy thought of Daniel, of the expectations he had placed on her, the role he had carved out and demanded she fill. "Yes," she said quietly. "There is." Their conversations continued, deepening, not through confession but through reflection. Samuel spoke about responsibility, how power, when unexamined, corrupted even well-intentioned people. He spoke about wealth, not as money but as insulation from consequence. Money, he said once, doesn't change people. It reveals what they were protected from. Lucy absorbed these ideas slowly. She didn't always agree, but she always listened. Something about Samuel's perspective felt earned, not theoretical. One evening, Lucy mentioned Vanessa Atieno for the first time, not by name, but by presence. "She replaced me." Lucy said, her voice neutral, not because she loved him more, but because she looked like the future he wanted to present. Samuel didn't respond immediately. Then he said, "Image is easier to maintain than integrity." Lucy smiled sadly. "I wish I'd known that earlier." "You know it now," Samuel said. "That counts." There were days when Lucy noticed Samuel was quieter than usual, his gaze more distant. On those days she didn't press. She had learned through her own pain that silence was not always avoidance. Sometimes it was processing. One afternoon, Lucy arrived to find Samuel not at his usual place. The space beneath the billboard was empty. A ripple of concern moved through her. She told herself it was irrational. He owed her nothing. He had his own life, his own rhythms. Still, she lingered longer than she meant to, scanning the area. An hour passed, then another. Just as she was about to leave, she spotted him across the street, speaking quietly with an older man in a tailored suit. The contrast was jarring, the worn clothes, the polished attire. They spoke briefly, then the man nodded and walked away. Lucy frowned. When Samuel finally returned to his spot, she asked casually, "Friend of yours?" Samuel hesitated a fraction of a second too long. "An acquaintance." Lucy did not push, but the unease settled deeper. She began to wonder if she truly knew him at all. And yet when Lucy considered how Samuel treated her with respect, patience, and unwavering honesty, she realized that knowing someone's past was not the same as knowing their character. Daniel had shared everything with her, his dreams, his frustrations, his plans, and still betrayed her without remorse. Samuel shared very little and had shown her nothing but care. One evening, Lucy said aloud what had been circling her thoughts. "You know," she said, "people assume you're invisible." Samuel smiled gently. "Most do, but you're not." Lucy continued, "Not really." He met her gaze. "Visibility is a choice." Lucy considered that. "Then why choose this?" Samuel looked at her for a long moment. "Because I needed to know who I was when no one was watching." The answer unsettled her and intrigued her. That night, Lucy lay awake in her rented room, staring at the ceiling. Samuel's words echoed in her mind. She wondered what kind of man needed to disappear to understand himself. She wondered what kind of truth he was carrying so carefully. Despite the questions, Lucy did not pull away. She did not demand explanations or draw boundaries fueled by fear. She continued to show up, to share meals, to listen. Her trust in Samuel was no longer casual. It was deliberate. And in that deliberate trust, Lucy crossed a quiet threshold, one she did not name, but one that would shape everything that followed. Because while Lucy was beginning to notice the cracks in Samuel's disguise, she had no idea how vast the truth beneath it was, or how violently it would eventually collide with the world that had already tried to erase her. For now, all she knew was this: the man the city ignored was far more than he appeared, and the woman the city discarded was no longer willing to be fooled by surfaces alone. Lucy Nyambura did not fall in love all at once. There was no sudden declaration, no dramatic realization that rearranged the world in a single moment. What happened instead was slower, quieter, like the way a wound closed without ceremony, or how a room warmed gradually when the sun lingered long enough at the window. It began with noticing absence. On a Wednesday afternoon, Lucy arrived at the intersection and found Samuel at a well, missing again. Not just stepping away, not speaking to someone nearby, gone. The space beneath the billboard felt strangely hollow, as if a familiar sound had been cut from the air. She waited longer than she intended to. As traffic streamed past, Lucy felt a subtle tension rise in her chest. She tried to reason with it. Samuel had never promised to be there. He owed her nothing. She had learned painfully not to confuse consistency with obligation. Still, when she finally turned to leave, the disappointment surprised her. That evening, Lucy recognized the feeling for what it was: concern. It unsettled her. She had rebuilt her life around caution, around not needing anyone, around never again tying her sense of safety to another person's presence. And yet here she was, unsettled by the absence of a man she barely knew, whose past remained largely unspoken. The next day, Samuel returned as if nothing had happened. "I thought you'd vanished," Lucy said lightly, trying to mask the relief in her voice. Samuel smiled apologetically. "Some days require attention elsewhere." Lucy raised an eyebrow. "That's vague." He chuckled. "It's honest." She accepted the answer without pressing, but the moment stayed with her. As weeks passed, Lucy realized how deeply Samuel's presence had begun to anchor her, not as a solution, but as a space where she could exhale. Their conversations no longer felt tentative. They flowed naturally, sometimes dipping into silence without discomfort. Lucy spoke more freely now, about the small humiliations of starting over, about the way she still flinched when someone raised their voice, about the dreams she was afraid to dream again. Samuel listened occasionally, offering perspective, never correction. "I keep thinking I should be stronger by now," Lucy admitted one evening. "That I should be over it." Samuel shook his head. "Healing doesn't respond well to deadlines." Lucy smiled faintly. Daniel used to say the same thing about productivity. Samuel's expression tightened briefly, then softened. "Some men measure worth by output. Others learn to measure it by presence." Lucy glanced at him. "And you, I measure it by what remains when everything else is stripped away." The words lingered. Lucy noticed herself looking forward to these moments, not with excitement, but with something steadier: anticipation without anxiety. It frightened her, precisely because it felt safe. One evening, as the city lights flickered on, Lucy sat beside Samuel longer than usual. The air was warm, the sounds of Nairobi settling into their familiar nighttime rhythm. "Do you ever miss who you used to be?" she asked suddenly. Samuel considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he said, "but I don't miss the illusions." "What illusions? That power protects you from yourself," he replied. "It doesn't." Lucy nodded slowly. "I thought love would." Samuel met her gaze. "It can, but only when it's mutual." The words landed gently but firmly. Lucy felt a quiet shift inside her. She realized that what she felt for Samuel was not escape, not desperation, not fantasy. It was recognition, a sense of being met where she was not where she pretended to be. That night, as Lucy walked back to her rented room, she acknowledged the truth she had been circling for days. She was growing attached, not to the idea of Samuel, not to what he represented, but to the way he treated her with dignity, patience, and unwavering respect, to the way he never made her feel small or indebted, to the way he allowed her pain to exist without demanding it justify itself. Lucy did not rush to define the feeling. She had learned the danger of labels applied too quickly. Instead, she set boundaries quietly. She did not depend on Samuel for money or support. She did not abandon her job search or her small sources of income. She continued building her independence, brick by brick. Whatever this was, she wanted it to grow alongside her strength, not replace it. Samuel seemed to understand this instinctively. He never offered to fix her situation, never suggested she deserved better as a prelude to control. He encouraged her work, her persistence, her self-trust. "You're rebuilding," he said once. "That matters more than arriving." Lucy took the words with her into every long day. There were moments, though, when the closeness edged towards something more tangible. A shared smile that lingered too long. A brief touch of hands when passing food. An unspoken awareness that settled between them. One afternoon, Lucy caught herself wondering what it would feel like to rest her head against Samuel's shoulder. The thought startled her. She did not act on it. Instead, she named the fear. "I'm scared," she admitted one evening, her voice low. "Not of you, of myself." Samuel turned fully toward her. "Of what exactly?" "Of mistaking kindness for safety again," Lucy said. "Of needing someone before I'm ready." Samuel nodded slowly. "That's a valid fear. You're not offended." "No," he replied. "Trust that grows without fear isn't trust. It's blindness." Lucy felt something loosen in her chest. They sat in silence after that, comfortable, thoughtful. Days later, Lucy faced another rejection, this time from a company she had hoped would be different. She returned to the intersection, exhausted, her resolve frayed. Samuel noticed immediately. "You don't have to be strong today," he said quietly. Lucy swallowed hard. "I don't know how not to be." Samuel handed her a bottle of water. "Then just be honest." The words broke through her carefully maintained composure. Tears welled uninvited. Lucy turned away, embarrassed. Samuel did not move closer. He did not touch her. He simply stayed. When the tears passed, Lucy exhaled shakily. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not trying to save me." Samuel smiled gently. "You're doing that yourself." In that moment, Lucy understood something essential. She was not falling in love because she was broken. She was falling in love because she was healing. The connection between them was not born from need, but from mutual recognition. Two people who had been stripped of illusions meeting without armor. Lucy did not yet know how this story would end. She did not know who Samuel truly was, or what truth still lay hidden beneath his calm exterior. But she knew this. For the first time since betrayal had torn her life open, Lucy felt emotionally safe. Not because she had found certainty, but because she had found honesty. And that she sensed was where real love began. The first whisper reached Lucy Nyambura before the laughter did. It came from a woman at the market who paused mid-transaction when Lucy approached, her eyes flicking briefly toward the intersection where Samuel Adewale often sat. The woman leaned closer to her friend, lowered her voice, and spoke just loudly enough to be heard. "That's her." Lucy felt it like a shift in temperature. She paid for her vegetables, thanked the vendor, and walked away without reacting. Years of marriage had taught her how to keep her face neutral when something cut deep. But the whispers followed. They multiplied quietly at first, glances that lingered too long, conversations that stopped when Lucy entered a space. Then they grew bolder. One afternoon, as Lucy passed a group of young men near the bus stop, one of them laughed openly. "So that's where she ended up," he said. "From wife to charity worker." Lucy kept walking, her spine straight, her steps steady. She did not turn around. She had learned that dignity sometimes meant refusing to acknowledge cruelty. What she hadn't learned yet was how quickly cruelty organized itself when given permission. The permission came from Daniel Mwangi. Lucy discovered this accidentally through a former acquaintance who still worked in Daniel's professional circle. They met at a cafe by chance, an awkward encounter that neither had planned. "I heard about you," the woman said cautiously, after a few minutes of small talk. "About your situation." Lucy nodded. "People hear a lot of things." The woman hesitated. "Daniel's been talking." Lucy felt a tightening in her chest. "Talking about what? About how you've lost direction," the woman said, carefully. "About how you're spending time with a beggar now. He said he tried to help you, but you refused." Lucy closed her eyes briefly. The familiar pattern revealed itself with painful clarity. Daniel was rewriting the narrative, positioning himself as the reasonable one, the generous one, casting Lucy as unstable, ungrateful, lost. Vanessa Atieno did not stay silent either. She appeared one Saturday morning at the edge of the intersection, impeccably dressed, sunglasses perched on her nose. Lucy saw her before Samuel did. Vanessa smiled when she noticed Lucy. It was the kind of smile that did not reach the eyes. "I wondered if this was true," Vanessa said, looking pointedly at Samuel before turning back to Lucy. "I thought Daniel was exaggerating." Lucy kept her voice calm. "What do you want, Vanessa?" "I just wanted to see," Vanessa replied lightly, "to understand how far you'd fallen." Samuel stood slowly. He did not move toward Vanessa, but his presence shifted, subtle, grounded. "You should leave," he said quietly. Vanessa looked at him, amused. "I wasn't speaking to you." Samuel met her gaze without blinking. "You are now." The firmness in his voice caught Lucy off guard. Vanessa noticed it too. She laughed softly, bold. "For someone in your position." Lucy stepped forward. "This conversation is over." Vanessa shrugged. "Of course. I just wanted to say Daniel and I are doing very well. Thriving, actually. It's amazing what happens when you choose the right partner." Lucy felt the familiar sting, but it was duller now, less personal. Vanessa leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I hope you find your way back. This," she gestured vaguely toward Samuel, "isn't a future." Lucy held her gaze. "Neither was my marriage." Vanessa straightened, clearly displeased. "Suit yourself." She walked away without another word. The encounter did not go unnoticed. Within days, the whispers turned into commentary. People spoke openly now, some with mockery, some with pity. She used to be respectable. Now look at her. Must be desperate. Lucy felt the weight of it everywhere she went. Even potential employers seemed to sense the stigma, their interest cooling the moment her name was recognized. One afternoon, Lucy overheard a woman say, "If she can't even choose a man properly, how can she be trusted with responsibility?" The judgment stung not because Lucy believed it, but because she recognized its power. Society was closing ranks, enforcing its rules. Women who failed at marriage were expected to disappear quietly, not reappear with autonomy. Samuel noticed the change immediately. "You're quieter," he said one evening. Lucy considered denying it, then shook her head. "People are talking," Samuel nodded. "They always do when a woman steps outside the role assigned to her." Lucy laughed bitterly. "I didn't even step outside it. I was pushed, and now," Samuel said gently, "you're being punished for not crawling back in." Lucy leaned against the wall, exhaustion creeping into her bones. "Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier to disappear." Samuel turned to her fully. "Don't." The single word carried more weight than a lecture. "I don't mean physically," Lucy clarified. "Just socially. To stop being visible, to stop being judged." Samuel studied her carefully. "Visibility invites scrutiny," he said, "but it also invites change." Lucy looked at him skeptically. "Change usually hurts the person who goes first." "Yes," he agreed. "It does." Despite the mounting pressure, Lucy did not stop seeing Samuel. If anything, her resolve hardened. Not out of defiance, but out of clarity. She had lived her life according to other people's expectations and been discarded anyway. She refused to repeat the pattern. Still, the strain showed. One evening, as Lucy returned to her rented room, she found a note slipped under her door. No name, just a message written in neat handwriting. "You're embarrassing yourself. Have some pride." Lucy stared at the paper for a long time before tearing it in half, then into quarters, then into nothing. She sat on her bed hands, shaking, not with fear but with anger. The next day, Daniel confronted her directly. He found her near the market, flanked by two acquaintances who clearly expected a show. "This needs to stop," Daniel said flatly. "You're humiliating yourself." Lucy met his gaze evenly. "I didn't ask for your concern. You're damaging your reputation," he continued. "People are talking about me too." Lucy laughed, once sharp and incredulous. "About you?" "Yes," he snapped. "It reflects poorly. You were my wife," Lucy emphasized. "You don't get to manage my life anymore." Daniel's expression hardened. "I tried to help you. You tried to control me," Lucy replied calmly. "There's a difference," he scoffed. "This man, this beggar, is using you. Everyone can see it." Lucy took a slow breath. "Everyone can see what they want." Daniel leaned in, his voice low. "Come back. I can talk to Vanessa. We can find a solution." Lucy felt something settle inside her, solid, immovable. "No," she said simply. Daniel straightened, anger flashing across his face. "Then don't expect mercy." Lucy watched him walk away, surrounded by approval and arrogance, and felt no regret. That evening, she sat beside Samuel in silence, the city humming around them. "They're trying to break you," Samuel said quietly. Lucy nodded. "I know. Are they succeeding?" Lucy considered the question carefully. "No," she said. "They're just showing me how little they ever saw me." Samuel smiled faintly. "That's a painful freedom." "Yes," Lucy agreed. "But it's still freedom." The ridicule continued. The pressure mounted. Lucy's name became shorthand for failure in some circles, scandal in others. But beneath the noise, something unshakable had formed. Lucy Nyambura no longer needed approval to survive. And in choosing dignity over acceptance, she crossed another threshold, one that would soon force the world to confront the truth it was so eager to distort. Lucy Nyambura understood with a clarity that surprised even her that choosing dignity was not a single act. It was a daily practice, quiet, deliberate, often lonely. The morning after Daniel confronted her, Lucy woke before dawn, the city still wrapped in that brief, fragile calm before the rush returned. She sat on the edge of her bed, feet on the cool floor, and let the weight of the past months settle without pushing it away. The whispers, the looks, the note under her door. Daniel's voice, still certain he had the right to decide what was best for her. She did not feel brave. She felt tired, but beneath the exhaustion was something steadier than courage, resolve. Lucy went through her routine washing, dressing, packing her bag with the little food she had prepared. When she stepped outside, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the buildings in pale gold. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel the need to hurry. At the intersection, Samuel Adewale was already there. He greeted her with a nod, his expression attentive. "You didn't sleep much." Lucy smiled faintly. "I slept enough." They sat side by side, watching the city wake. For several minutes, neither spoke. Lucy appreciated that Samuel never rushed her into conversation, never demanded explanations for the heaviness he sensed. "I've been thinking," Lucy said finally, "about what Daniel said, about what everyone keeps saying." Samuel waited. "They think I'm choosing this life out of desperation," she continued, "that I'm clinging to you because I have nothing else." Samuel turned slightly toward her. "And what do you think?" Lucy met his gaze without hesitation. "I think I'm choosing myself." The words felt solid when she spoke them. Real. Samuel nodded slowly. "That's not something many people recognize when it happens." Lucy let out a quiet breath. "I spent years shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. I won't do it again. Not for Daniel, not for society, not even for you. She held his gaze, making sure he understood the last part. Samuel smiled, not offended, not defensive. Respectful. I wouldn't want you to. That response mattered more to Lucy than she expected. As the days passed, Lucy made her choice visible, not as a provocation, but as a boundary. She did not hide her friendship with Samuel. She did not explain it either. When people asked invasive questions, she responded calmly, or not at all. When they mocked her, she refused to engage. This, she discovered, unsettled them more than anger ever had. Lucy focused on what she could control. She took on more temporary work, even when it meant exhaustion. She saved carefully, tracking every coin. She enrolled in a short evening course offered by a community center, basic bookkeeping. Something practical. Something she could build on. Samuel encouraged her quietly, never steering her choices, only reinforcing her confidence. "You're investing in your future," he said one evening. "That's powerful." Lucy smiled. "It doesn't feel powerful. It feels slow." "Slow things last," Samuel replied. Despite the steadiness she was building, Lucy knew she was walking a line. The city did not forgive women easily. Opportunities remained scarce. Judgment lingered like a shadow. One afternoon, after a long shift cleaning offices, Lucy returned to the intersection later than usual. Samuel was packing up his few belongings, preparing to move for the night. "Do you ever get tired of this?" Lucy asked quietly. Samuel considered the question. Of the assumptions, yes. Of the stillness, Lucy nodded. "I think I understand that." She hesitated, then spoke again. "I want to be clear about something." Samuel turned to face her fully. "I care about you," Lucy said, "but I won't let that care replace my independence. I won't be rescued. I won't be hidden. And I won't be defined by who I stand next to." Samuel's expression softened. "Lucy, I would never ask you to be." "I need to hear that," she admitted. "You have," he said simply, "and you'll hear it again if you need to." That evening, as Lucy walked home, she felt something settle into place. Not romance, not certainty, but alignment. She was choosing a path that honored her values, not her fear. The consequences of that choice came quickly. A few days later, Lucy was called into a small office after a promising interview. The manager, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a measured tone, closed the door and folded her hands. "I want to be honest with you," she said. "Your qualifications are suitable. Your references check out. But there are concerns." Lucy braced herself. "About what? About your personal situation?" The woman replied carefully. "Your visibility, the attention surrounding you." Lucy felt the familiar heat rise in her chest. "You mean my divorce and your associations," the manager added. Lucy inhaled slowly. "My personal life does not affect my ability to work." The woman studied her for a long moment. "I agree," she said, "but others may not." Lucy nodded. "Then perhaps this is not the right place for me." The manager smiled faintly. "Perhaps not." Lucy left without bitterness, without pleading. She had learned that some doors closed, not because of failure, but because of misalignment. When she told Samuel about it, he listened carefully. "You're disappointed," he said. "Yes," Lucy admitted. "But I'm not ashamed." Samuel nodded. "That's progress." That night, Lucy received a message from an unknown number. "You're making a mistake. Pride won't feed you." Lucy stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message without replying. She was done negotiating her worth. The following week brought an unexpected opportunity. A small nonprofit Lucy had volunteered with years earlier reached out looking for a temporary administrative help. The pay was modest, the hours uncertain, but the work aligned with Lucy's values. She accepted without hesitation. The job was demanding but meaningful. Lucy worked with women navigating transitions of their own, widows, single mothers, survivors rebuilding their lives. Their stories resonated deeply. Lucy found that her own pain gave her insight, patience, empathy. One afternoon, after a long day, Lucy returned to the intersection tired but grounded. Samuel noticed immediately. "Something changed," he said. Lucy smiled. "I think I found my footing." Samuel returned the smile. "I never doubted you would." As the city lights came on, Lucy sat beside him, feeling a sense of rightness she had not known in years. She did not know what the future held. She did not know who Samuel truly was or what secrets still lay beneath his calm exterior. She only knew that for the first time since betrayal had stripped her bare, she was making choices rooted in self-respect rather than fear. Lucy Nyambura had chosen her dignity, and though the world had not yet caught up to that choice, it would have to sooner or later, because a woman who refused to be diminished was far more dangerous than one who complied. Lucy Nyambura began to sense that Samuel Adewale was carrying something heavier than silence. It wasn't a single moment that alerted her, but a collection of small shifts, subtle changes in his behavior that only someone who had learned to watch closely would notice. He grew more guarded on certain days, his gaze distant, his responses measured. At times, he seemed to be listening for something beyond the noise of the street, as if anticipating an interruption that never quite arrived. Lucy did not confront him. She had learned that some truths resisted force. But curiosity settled in her chest nonetheless. One afternoon, Lucy arrived at the intersection to find Samuel deep in conversation with a woman she did not recognize. The woman was dressed simply, but her posture was confident, her movements precise. When she noticed Lucy approaching, she paused, studying her openly. Samuel stood when he saw Lucy. "Lucy," he said, his tone warm but cautious. "This is Miriam." Miriam smiled politely. "It's good to finally meet you." Lucy blinked. Finally, Samuel cleared his throat. "Miriam helps manage certain things for me." Lucy nodded slowly. "Nice to meet you." Miriam's gaze lingered on Lucy for a moment longer than was comfortable, not unkindly, but with assessment. Then she turned back to Samuel. "We need to talk," Miriam said, quietly. Samuel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Later. It's not something that can wait," Miriam replied. Lucy shifted, uncomfortably aware she was witnessing something private. "I can go," she offered. Samuel hesitated, then nodded. "I'll see you later." Lucy walked away, the conversation replaying in her mind. Manage certain things. The phrase echoed with ambiguity. That evening, Lucy found it difficult to concentrate. The nonprofit office buzzed with activity, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Samuel and the woman named Miriam. She felt an unexpected sting of insecurity, not jealousy, but uncertainty. She had been careful not to imagine a future with Samuel, not to project hopes onto him, and yet the realization that parts of his life were unfolding entirely beyond her view unsettled her. When Lucy returned to the intersection the next day, Samuel was quieter than usual. "You seem distracted," Lucy said gently. Samuel sighed. "I am. Do you want to talk about it?" He looked at her for a long moment, weighing something invisible. "Not yet." Lucy nodded. "That's okay." Samuel smiled faintly. "You're very patient." Lucy met his gaze. "I've learned the difference between patience and erasure." The words landed with quiet force. Over the next few weeks, signs continued to surface. Brief phone calls Samuel took out of Lucy's hearing, the occasional arrival of well-dressed individuals who spoke to him in low tones before disappearing into the city. Each time Samuel returned to his place, beneath the billboard, his demeanor composed as if nothing had happened. Lucy found herself torn between two instincts: respect for Samuel's boundaries and the growing awareness that his presence in her life was not as simple as it appeared. One evening, Lucy voiced her thoughts carefully. "I don't need to know everything about you," she said, "but I need to know whether I'm being honest with someone who's honest with me." Samuel closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was something like regret in his expression. "You are," he said quietly. "I promise you that." Lucy studied him, but honesty doesn't always arrive all at once. Samuel continued. Sometimes it comes in stages when the person receiving it is ready. Lucy considered that. And you think I'm not ready? Samuel shook his head. I think the truth I carry would complicate the life you're still building. Lucy felt a flicker of irritation. You don't get to decide what I can handle. Samuel met her gaze unflinching. You're right. The admission surprised her. I'm trying to protect something, he added. Not my image, not my comfort. You. Lucy exhaled slowly. Protection without consent feels a lot like control. Samuel nodded. That's a fair comparison. They sat in silence after that, the city humming around them. Lucy felt a tension she hadn't experienced. Since her marriage ended, a sense of imbalance of withheld truth. Later that night, Lucy replayed the conversation in her mind. She wondered whether she was repeating old patterns, accepting partial transparency, minimizing her discomfort, telling herself patience was virtue. She promised herself one thing: she would not ignore her intuition again. A few days later, the truth pressed closer. Lucy was leaving work early one afternoon when she noticed a black SUV idling across the street. The windows were tinted, the engine quiet but powerful. As Lucy passed the rear window, lowered slightly, Miriam sat inside. Lucy, she called. Lucy stopped, her heart pounding. She approached cautiously. Miriam gestured for her to step closer. I wanted to speak with you. Privately. Lucy hesitated. About what? About Samuel, Miriam said. Lucy's chest tightened. Is he in trouble? Miriam smiled faintly. Not in the way you're thinking. Lucy crossed her arms. Then why am I standing next to a luxury vehicle being asked questions by a stranger? Miriam studied her for a long moment. Because you matter to him. The statement landed heavily. Samuel Adderwale is not who he appears to be. Miriam continued. But the version of him you know, that part is real. Lucy felt her pulse quicken. What are you saying? I'm saying that the man who sits on the street is also a man who commands rooms you've never been in. Miriam said carefully. And that duality exists for a reason. Lucy's voice was steady despite the storm inside her. Why are you telling me this? Because things are about to change, Miriam replied. And when they do, you deserve to understand the ground you're standing on. Lucy took a step back. If Samuel has something to tell me, he should tell me himself. Miriam nodded. He will, when the timing is right. Lucy watched the SUV pull away, her thoughts racing. That evening, when Lucy found Samuel at the intersection, she said nothing at first. She simply sat beside him, feeling the weight of the unspoken truth between them. You spoke to Miriam, Samuel said quietly. Lucy turned to him. Yes. He closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry. For what? Lucy asked. For asking you to trust me while withholding the part of my life that explains everything. Lucy's voice trembled slightly. Are you lying to me? Samuel shook his head. No, but I am not telling you the whole truth. Lucy stood, the air suddenly too tight to breathe. I won't beg for honesty, she said, her voice firm, despite the ache in her chest. But I won't pretend this doesn't hurt. Samuel rose as well. I never wanted to hurt you. Intent doesn't erase impact, Lucy replied softly. She walked away before the conversation could unravel further. That night, Lucy lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with questions. Who was Samuel Adderwale? What life did he live beyond the intersection? And most importantly, what did it mean for her that she had begun to love a man whose truth she did not yet know? The trust between them had not shattered, but it had cracked. And through that crack, the light of revelation was beginning to push its way in. The day everything began to unravel did not arrive with warning. Lucy Nyambura was shelving files at the nonprofit office when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She almost ignored it. Unknown calls had become a source of anxiety, but something compelled her to answer. Lucy, a voice said urgently. It was Miriam. I need you to come to St. Anne's Hospital, now. Lucy's stomach tightened. What happened? There was a pause, brief, controlled. Samuel collapsed. The world narrowed to a single, ringing silence. Lucy grabbed her bag, without thinking, murmured an explanation to her supervisor, and rushed out into the street. The ride to the hospital felt unreal, traffic lights blurring the city, moving on as if nothing had shifted. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone, replaying Miriam's words again and again. Samuel collapsed. At St. Anne's, the atmosphere was tense. Security at the entrance was heavier than usual, men in dark suits, speaking quietly into earpieces, their eyes scanning the corridor. Lucy slowed confusion, mixing with dread. This was not the hospital she knew. Miriam met her near the ICU doors. Her expression was composed, but her eyes betrayed urgency. "Is he?" Lucy began. "He's stable," Miriam said. "For now." Lucy exhaled shakily. "Can I see him?" Miriam hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. But you need to be prepared for what you're about to witness." Lucy frowned, prepared for what Miriam did not answer. She led Lucy down the corridor. As they approached the room, Lucy noticed more details: doctors, speaking with unusual deference, nurses, moving quickly, administrators conferring in hushed tones. A man in a tailored suit stood near the door, speaking into his phone. "Yes, sir. The board has been notified." Lucy stopped walking. "The board," she whispered. Miriam turned to her. "Lucy, there's no easy way to do this." Before Lucy could respond, the door opened. The man in the suit stepped aside, nodding respectfully at Miriam and then at Lucy. "Ms. Nyambura," he said, "we've been expecting you." Lucy stared at him. "You know my name." Miriam placed a steady hand on Lucy's arm. "Please, just come inside." The ICU room was quiet, filled with the soft rhythm of machines. Samuel lay on the bed, his face pale, an oxygen line resting beneath his nose. He looked smaller, somehow stripped of the composure that had always anchored him. Lucy rushed to his side, taking his hand without hesitation. "Samuel," she whispered. "I'm here." His fingers tightened weakly around hers. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he murmured. Lucy swallowed hard. Find out what? Samuel met her gaze, his eyes heavy with apology. "Everything." Before Lucy could ask another question, the door opened again. More people entered, men and women dressed sharply, their presence commanding the room. One of them stepped forward, his posture formal. "Mr. Adewale," he said quietly. "The situation is contained. The media has been diverted. Your instructions." Lucy's breath caught. She looked from the man to Samuel, then to Miriam. "What is happening?" Samuel squeezed her hand. "Lucy, I need you to listen." Her chest felt tight, constricted. "I am listening." Samuel took a slow breath. "My name is Samuel Adewale," he said, voice steady despite his condition. "I am the founder and CEO of Adewale Group." The words fell into the room like a dropped glass, sharp final. Lucy felt the floor tilt beneath her. "That's not..." She shook her head. "That's not possible." Samuel's gaze never left hers. "It is." Lucy pulled her hand away, stepping back as if burned. "You're saying you're what, pretending to be a beggar? All this time?" Samuel closed his eyes briefly. "I wasn't pretending to be poor. I was choosing to live without protection." Lucy laughed once, brittle and disbelieving. "Protection? You let me think you had nothing. You let everyone treat you like that." "I let them reveal themselves," Samuel said quietly. "And I let myself remember who I was without influence." Lucy's heart pounded. Anger surged, sharp and disorienting. "So what was I?" Test no," Samuel said immediately. "Never." Lucy's voice trembled. "Then what was I to you?" Samuel struggled to sit up, wincing slightly. "You were real. The first person who saw me without needing anything in return." Lucy shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "You watched me be humiliated. You let me be judged for standing beside you. I didn't expect the cruelty to turn on you," Samuel said softly. "If I had, you don't get to say that." Lucy snapped. You don't get to decide what risks I take without telling me the truth." Silence fell heavy in the room. Miriam spoke gently. "Lucy Samuel disappeared from public life months ago, after a hostile takeover attempt by members of his own board. He stepped away to protect the company and himself, while assessing who could be trusted." Lucy turned on her. "And you thought sitting on the street was the answer?" "It was clarity," Samuel said, "and anonymity." Lucy laughed again, bitter. "Anonymity for you, exposure for me." Samuel reached for her hand again, stopping short when she flinched. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you sooner." Lucy stared at him, seeing him now through a lens she hadn't chosen. The calm, the insight, the authority she had sensed but dismissed. It all made sense, and that hurt the most. "I didn't choose you because I thought you were broken," Lucy said quietly. "I chose you because you were kind." Samuel nodded. "I know. Now I don't know what's real anymore," she whispered. "It was all real," Samuel insisted. "Every word, every moment." Lucy stepped back further, her emotions crashing into each other. Betrayal, confusion, grief. This was not the betrayal of Daniel Sharp and cruel. This was something more complex, more intimate. "You took away my choice," Lucy said. Again. Samuel's face crumpled. "I never wanted to hurt you." Lucy wiped her tears, straightening. "Intent doesn't erase impact." She turned toward the door. "Lucy," Samuel called weakly. "Please." She paused, her hand on the handle. "I need time," she said, her voice firm but fractured. "And space." Miriam moved aside as Lucy stepped into the corridor. Outside the ICU, the world rushed back in phones, ringing footsteps echoing power and urgency, humming through the air. Lucy leaned against the wall, her knees shaking. She had loved a man she thought had nothing. Now she faced the truth that he had everything. And she didn't know whether that made what they shared stronger, or whether it shattered it completely. Lucy walked out of the hospital, into the harsh afternoon light, her heart in pieces she couldn't yet name. The secret was no longer hidden, and nothing would ever be the same again. Lucy Nyambura did not go back to the intersection after the hospital. For days she moved through her life as if underwater sounds, muffled movements, slow emotions arriving late and overwhelming. She went to work. She smiled when required. She completed tasks with mechanical precision. But inside, her thoughts looped endlessly around the same moment. Samuel's voice in the ICU, calm and apologetic, saying words that had split her reality in two. Founder and CEO of Attawale Group. The name echoed everywhere now, on the radio during her commute, in headlines shared by co-workers, in hushed conversations at the nonprofit office. "Did you hear about Samuel Attawale?" someone whispered one afternoon. "The billionaire who vanished. They say he reappeared after collapsing in public." Lucy kept her eyes on her screen, her pulse pounding. Every mention felt like exposure, like her private pain was being repackaged as public spectacle. She avoided Miriam's calls. She ignored unknown numbers. She needed distance space to think without being managed, explained to, or protected. At night, Lucy lay awake, replaying memories now altered by context. Samuel redirecting money to other beggars. Samuel speaking calmly to men in power. Samuel never once asking for anything. It all made sense now, and yet, understanding did not soothe the hurt. What haunted Lucy most was not the lie itself, but the way it mirrored her past. Daniel had withheld truth to maintain control. Samuel had withheld truth to maintain what safety assessment power. The reasons differed. The impact did not. Lucy had promised herself she would never again accept partial honesty, never again surrender her agency in the name of patience or protection. And yet Samuel had entered her life gently, without demands, without cruelty. He had not diminished her. He had not exploited her financially or emotionally. If anything, he had encouraged her independence at every turn. That contradiction tore at her. One evening, Lucy found herself standing outside the hospital again, the building glowing against the darkening sky. She hadn't planned to come. Her feet had simply carried her there. She did not go inside. Instead, she sat on a bench across the street, watching the steady flow of people entering and leaving. She wondered how many of them carried secrets large enough to fracture someone else's life. Her phone buzzed. A message from Miriam. "He's asking for you. Not the company, not the board. You." Lucy stared at the screen for a long moment before typing a reply. "I'm not ready." The response came quickly. "I understand, but he needs to tell you the rest." Lucy slipped the phone back into her bag without replying. Days passed. The city adjusted to the revelation of Samuel Adewale's return. Analysts debated his strategy. Investors speculated. The story shifted from mystery to admiration. Headlines framed his disappearance as brilliance, his humility as genius. No one asked about the woman who had stood beside him when he had nothing. Lucy noticed the shift immediately. At the market, vendors smiled more warmly when they recognized her. Some looked at her with curiosity instead of contempt. "That was you," a woman asked one afternoon. "The one with him?" Lucy nodded. The woman shook her head in amazement. "You must be very special." Lucy forced a polite smile and walked away. Special. The word tasted bitter. She hadn't wanted to be special. She had wanted honesty. The pressure mounted subtly. Acquaintances reached out. Old friends resurfaced. Even Daniel's name appeared again, this time in the form of a carefully worded message. "We should talk." Lucy deleted it without response. Samuel tried again a week later, this time through a handwritten note delivered by Miriam. "I owe you the truth without filters or fear. Not as a CEO, as a man who wronged you. Please let me try." Lucy held the note for a long time, her fingers tracing the uneven handwriting. It was undeniably Samuel's, careful, deliberate, restrained. Against her better judgment, she agreed. They met not at the hospital, not at an office, but at a quiet public park on the edge of the city. Neutral ground, open space, no power dynamics disguised as privacy. Samuel arrived without entourage, without spectacle. He walked slowly, still recovering, dressed simply. When he saw Lucy, he stopped several steps away. "Thank you for coming," he said. Lucy crossed her arms. "Don't thank me yet." Samuel nodded. "Fair." They sat on opposite ends of a bench, the distance between them intentional. "I'll start with the truth." "I should have told you first," Samuel said quietly. "I didn't disappear to test people. I disappeared because I didn't trust myself anymore." Lucy said nothing. "My company grew faster than I did," he continued. "Power insulated me. Money protected me from consequence. When my own board tried to remove me, I realized I had built something that no longer reflected who I was." Lucy stared straight ahead. "So you chose poverty." "I chose anonymity," Samuel corrected. "To remember who I was without leverage." "And I was collateral," Lucy said softly. Samuel flinched. "No, you were. Unexpected." Lucy turned to him. "You let me believe we were equal. You let me defend you, lose standing for you, be judged for you while you always had an exit." Samuel swallowed. "You're right." Silence stretched between them. "I never meant to make you smaller," he said. "I admired your strength long before you admired mine." Lucy laughed bitterly. "You didn't give me the chance to choose with full knowledge. That's not admiration. That's control." Samuel bowed his head. "I know." Lucy took a slow breath. "Do you know what hurt the most?" Samuel looked up. "Tell me." "That. For the first time since my marriage ended, I felt safe," Lucy said. "Not because you were powerful. Because you were honest, or so I thought." Samuel's voice broke slightly. "I was honest about who I was becoming. I wasn't honest about who I had been." Lucy stood. "Those aren't separate things." Samuel did not argue. "I'm not saying this to punish you," Lucy continued. "I'm saying it because I won't rewrite my boundaries to accommodate someone else's comfort again." Samuel rose slowly. "What are you asking for?" Lucy met his gaze, steady and resolute. "Nothing. Not money, not rescue, not explanation. I'm choosing distance because I need to know that my life, my dignity, doesn't hinge on anyone else's truth." Samuel nodded, pain evident but contained. "I accept that." Lucy paused, surprised by the absence of protest. "You're not asking me to stay?" she asked. Samuel shook his head. "No, I'm asking you not to disappear." Lucy considered that. "I won't." She turned to leave, then stopped. "What we had mattered," she said without looking back. "That doesn't disappear just because the truth arrived late." Samuel's voice was quiet. "It mattered to me, too." Lucy walked away, her steps firm, her heart heavy but intact. She did not know what the future held for Samuel, for herself, or for whatever remained between them. But she knew this. She would not allow love, however sincere, to erase the lesson she had paid for with years of silence. The truth had been revealed. Now came the harder work, deciding what justice, healing, and forgiveness would look like when power was no longer invisible. Lucy Nyambura did not expect justice to arrive quietly. She had imagined, if she allowed herself to imagine at all, that it would come with confrontation, with raised voices and dramatic reversals. Instead, it unfolded through a series of small, deliberate reckonings that rippled outward, from truths long suppressed. The first ripple reached Daniel Mwangi. Lucy learned about it accidentally through a colleague at the nonprofit who followed business news closely. They were eating lunch when the colleague looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised. "Daniel Mwangi," she said. "Didn't he used to be your husband?" Lucy felt a familiar tightening, but nodded. "Yes." The colleague hesitated. "His company just lost a major partnership. Investors pulled out after an internal audit flagged irregularities." Lucy's fork paused midair. Irregularities. Misrepresentation. The colleague continued. "Apparently, he exaggerated his role in several projects. There's talk of an ethics review." Lucy swallowed. She felt no satisfaction, only a strange sense of inevitability. Over the following weeks, Daniel's carefully constructed image began to crack. Clients distanced themselves, invitations dried up. The confidence that had once insulated him faltered under scrutiny. Vanessa Atieno did not weather the shift well. Lucy encountered her one afternoon near the same cafe where she had once overheard whispers about herself. Vanessa looked different, still polished but tense, her smile forced. When she saw Lucy, she froze. "Lucy," Vanessa said too brightly. "It's been a while." Lucy regarded her calmly. "It has." Vanessa shifted her bag on her shoulder. "I wanted to say, things got complicated." Lucy waited. "I didn't know about Daniel's situation." Vanessa continued quickly. "If I had," Lucy raised a hand gently. "You don't need to explain anything to me." Vanessa's composure slipped. "You don't understand. People are talking. They're acting like I should have known." Lucy nodded. "That's usually how it works." Vanessa bristled. "I didn't steal him. He chose me." "Yes," Lucy said evenly. "And now you're learning what it means to be chosen by someone who measures worth by advantage." Vanessa stared at her, stunned. "You think you're better than me now?" Lucy shook her head. "No, I think I'm free." Vanessa said nothing more. She turned and walked away, heels striking the pavement harder than necessary. Lucy felt no triumph, only closure. The second ripple reached Daniel's family. His mother called Lucy late one evening, a number Lucy had not seen in months. Lucy hesitated before answering. "Yes," she said. There was a pause on the other end. "Lucy," Daniel's mother said stiffly. "We need to talk." Lucy leaned back against her chair. "About what about?" "Misunderstandings," the woman replied. "About how things ended." Lucy closed her eyes briefly. "I don't think there were misunderstandings." Another pause. "Daniel is under a lot of pressure. He's made mistakes." Lucy listened quietly. "You were a good wife," the woman said at last. "Perhaps we were too harsh." Lucy felt the weight of years pressing against that single sentence. "I didn't need to be a good wife to deserve respect," Lucy replied calmly. "I needed to be human." The line went quiet. "I wish you well," Lucy added. but I'm not reopening what I've already healed." She ended the call without waiting for a response. That night, Lucy sat alone in her room, reflecting on the strange symmetry of it all. Daniel's fall was not dramatic. It was procedural, institutional, impersonal. The same systems he had benefited from were now holding him accountable. Lucy had not orchestrated it. She had not asked for it. Justice, she realized, did not always require a witness. Sometimes it arrived simply because lies could not hold their shape forever. The final ripple reached Samuel Attawale. The board of Attawale Group convened publicly for the first time since his return. Press conferences followed. Statements were released. Samuel reclaimed his position, not with bravado, but with a clear restructuring of leadership and accountability. Lucy watched the coverage from a distance. She noticed the way Samuel spoke, measured, transparent, refusing to romanticize his absence. He did not frame his time on the streets as a stunt or experiment. He acknowledged the privilege that had allowed him to step away and return. "I learned the power distorts feedback," he said in one interview, "and that dignity is often extended selectively. We are restructuring not just operations, but values." Lucy appreciated the restraint, the honesty. Still, she kept her distance. Samuel respected that. He did not call. He did not appear unannounced. He sent no gifts, made no grand gestures. When they crossed paths at a public event weeks later, one organized by Lucy's nonprofit, he greeted her with a nod and nothing more. That restraint mattered. Lucy's own life continued to take shape. The nonprofit offered her a longer-term contract. Her bookkeeping course concluded with strong recommendations. Slowly, opportunities aligned, not because of who she stood beside, but because of the work she had done. One evening after a community workshop, Lucy found herself walking alone through the park where she and Samuel had last spoken. She sat on the same bench, the city lights flickering through the trees. She thought about forgiveness, not as absolution, not as reconciliation, but as release. Lucy had forgiven Daniel, not because he had apologized, but because carrying his choices no longer served her. Samuel was different. His deception had been born not of contempt, but of fear and disillusionment. That did not erase the harm, but it complicated it. A familiar presence approached. Lucy looked up to see Samuel standing a respectful distance away. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said. "I come here sometimes," Lucy replied. "It's quiet." Samuel nodded. "May I sit?" Lucy considered, then gestured to the bench. "You may." They sat, the space between them intentional, but no longer rigid. "I wanted to tell you something," Samuel said. Without expectation, Lucy listened. "I accepted full responsibility with the board," he continued. "Not just for the absence, but for the impact. On the company, on the people affected, on you." Lucy studied his face. He looked tired, grounded. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Samuel added. "I'm telling you because accountability matters even when there's no reward." Lucy breathed slowly. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while. "Do you regret it?" Lucy asked eventually. Samuel considered. "I regret not trusting you with the truth sooner. I don't regret becoming someone who values it." Lucy nodded. "That's fair." She stood adjusting her bag. "I don't know what forgiveness looks like yet." Samuel rose as well. "Take all the time you need." Lucy met his gaze, steady, unafraid. "I am." As she walked away, Lucy felt something settle inside her. Not resolution, but balance. Justice had not come with revenge. Healing had not required reconciliation. And dignity had not been restored by wealth or status, but by boundaries honored and truths faced. Lucy Nyambura had stood at the center of a storm she did not create, and she had emerged, not untouched, but unbroken. Lucy Nyambura's life did not transform overnight after justice found its footing. It softened, it steadied, it widened. The weeks following her final conversation with Samuel Attawale were quiet, not empty but intentionally uncluttered. Lucy leaned into routine with a new awareness. She woke early, Not out of anxiety, but choice. She walked to work with her shoulders relaxed. She laughed more easily. When challenges arose, she met them without the reflex to shrink. For the first time in her adult life, Lucy was living without apology. The nonprofit renewed her contract, then expanded her role. Lucy's attention to detail, her empathy with clients, and her calm authority earned trust quickly. She became someone women asked for by name, someone who listened without judgment, who understood rebuilding because she had lived it. One afternoon, as Lucy facilitated a small group session for women navigating divorce and displacement, she caught herself speaking words she hadn't planned. "You don't owe anyone proof of your pain," she said gently. "And you don't need permission to rebuild." The women nodded. Some cried. Lucy felt the weight of her own journey settle into meaning. Later that evening, Lucy sat alone in her room, reviewing paperwork for an upcoming program. A knock sounded at the door, soft, deliberate. She hesitated, then opened it. Samuel stood in the hallway. He looked different, not wealthier, not more powerful, but clearer. The ease of someone no longer divided between selves. "I hope this isn't intrusive," he said. "Miriam said you might be home." Lucy considered him for a moment, then stepped aside. "You can come in." Samuel entered, glancing around the modest space without comment. He stood until Lucy gestured toward the chair. "I won't stay long," he said. "I wanted to speak to you before I leave the city." Lucy sat across from him. "How long?" A while, Samuel replied. "I'm stepping back again. Not disappearing, just redistributing leadership. The company doesn't need me at the center to function." Lucy studied his face. "And you," Samuel smiled faintly. "I need to remember that power isn't proximity, it's responsibility." Lucy nodded. "That sounds like growth." "It is," he said, "and it's because of you." Lucy lifted a hand gently. "No, it's because you chose to listen." Samuel accepted the correction. "I wanted to ask you something," he continued. Without pressure, Lucy met his gaze. "Go on. When I come back," Samuel said, choosing his words carefully, "would you consider starting again with full truth, full agency, and no imbalance?" Lucy felt the question settle, not as a demand, but as an offering. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she reflected on the woman she had been when she first met Samuel, tired, displaced, uncertain of her worth. She thought of the woman she was now, grounded, clear-eyed, unafraid to stand alone. "I won't say yes to something I'm not ready for," Lucy said calmly. Samuel nodded. "I wouldn't want you to," but Lucy continued. "I won't say no out of fear either." Samuel's expression softened. "I need time," Lucy said. "Not because I doubt you, but because I trust myself." Samuel smiled. "That's all I hope to hear." They stood. There was no embrace, no dramatic farewell, just mutual respect. When Samuel left, Lucy closed the door and leaned against it briefly, not overwhelmed but thoughtful. The moment felt complete, regardless of what came next. Months passed. Lucy's work expanded. She helped launch a new initiative supporting women leaving unstable marriages and unsafe homes. The program gained attention, not sensational, but steady. Lucy spoke at panels not as a victim, but as a practitioner shaped by experience. She never mentioned Samuel. She did not need to. One afternoon, Lucy ran into Daniel Mwangi by chance. He looked smaller somehow, less certain. When he saw her, he froze. "Lucy," he said, "you look, well." Lucy smiled politely. "I am." Daniel hesitated. "I wanted to apologize for everything." Lucy studied him, this man who had once defined her limits. "I don't need an apology to move forward," she said, "but I hope you're learning." Daniel nodded, chastened. "I am." Lucy wished him well and walked on without looking back. That night, Lucy stood on her balcony watching the city lights stretch into the distance. She felt no longing, no bitterness, only quiet gratitude for the path she had chosen. She had not been saved. She had survived, rebuilt, and redefined herself. Several months later, Lucy received a letter. It was handwritten. "Lucy, I am in a small town by the coast. No headlines, no boardrooms. Just work that matters and people who speak honestly. I don't know where our paths will lead, but I know this meeting you changed the way I measure success. Whatever you choose, thank you for reminding me that dignity is not granted. It is practiced. Samuel Lucy folded the letter carefully and placed it in her drawer, not as a promise, but as a chapter acknowledged. She did not rush toward the future. She walked toward it steady, whole, and unafraid. Lucy Nyambura had chosen love once out of compassion. She had chosen herself out of courage, and in doing so, she had learned the most powerful truth of all, that healing does not require rescue, that justice does not need revenge, and that love, real love, only survives where truth and dignity stand side by side. Lucy Nyambura's story is not about a woman who was saved by wealth, nor about a man whose riches rewrote fate. It is about what remains when illusion falls away and who we choose to become in that space. Lucy was betrayed in a way that many people know too well. Not through sudden cruelty, but through slow erasure. She gave loyalty where it was expected, silence where it was rewarded, and patience where it was demanded. And still she was discarded. Her pain reminds us of a difficult truth. Sacrifice does not guarantee respect, and endurance is not the same as love. What changed Lucy's life was not the discovery that Samuel was powerful. It was the moment she realized she was allowed to be powerful too, without permission, without validation, without standing beside someone else's status. Even when the truth shattered her sense of safety, Lucy refused to rebuild her life on comfort alone. She chose honesty over illusion, dignity over approval, and self-trust over fear. Samuel's journey offers its own lesson. Power, when left unchecked, distorts both vision and conscience. Stepping away from privilege did not make him righteous, but it made him accountable. And accountability, unlike wealth, cannot be hidden behind influence. True change began not when he reclaimed his position, but when he accepted responsibility for the harm his silence caused. This story reminds us that healing is not dramatic. It is patient. It does not rush forgiveness, nor does it demand reconciliation at the cost of self-respect. Justice does not always arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrives quietly when people are finally seen for who they are, not who they pretend to be. Most of all, Lucy's journey teaches us that love is not proven by how much we endure, but by how safe we are allowed to be. Real love does not require us to disappear, shrink, or wait in the dark for truth. It stands where dignity is honored and choice is respected. If this story resonated with you, we would love to hear your thoughts. What part of Lucy's journey spoke to your own experiences? Share your reflections in the comments below. And if you believe stories about healing